Well, thank you. It's indeed a transition, but I'm very happy to have this set of speakers in front of me because I think a lot of terms that I will also mention in this presentation have already been mentioned in the talk before. And so it's not a change of title, but now we dive a little bit deeper into quantum chemistry on quantum computers. And so in particular, as the title mentioned, how we can use this to think about better drugs that use, for example, light in order to treat and prevent actually cancer. And so this is about photodynamic cancer therapy. And if you haven't heard about it, this little cartoon tries to explain it to you. So basically, you can think about a patient takes a drug. The drug gets absorbed in the body, and it doesn't do anything, okay? Until you actually shine light on it. And you can actually shine light on the human body, spatially and temporally, very much controlled. And once you do that, you actually activate the drug, okay? And then this light activation is, so the light is absorbed by a species called a photosensitizer. And then the extra energy that the photosensitizer absorbs gets then sort of chemically transformed in the body, and then starts a cascade of reactions that will then initiate cell death. And since you want to do this only spatially at the point in the body where a cancer might be located, then you can just kill those cancer cells that you're interested in, but the vital normal cells you can actually keep alive. So it only acts within the cancer cell itself. So it is very promising because it has less side effects than usual cancer treatments, and it can be done very targeted, and it can be repeated many, many times. So it's slightly different from the usual chemotherapy. And what is hindering sort of photodynamic therapy to be like one of the standard procedures in today's healthcare and life science? And that's because up to now, the development of new photosensitized drugs mostly relies exclusively on experimental approaches. And so with this project here, this use case that I'm presenting, we are working with actual medical doctors and chemical engineers from Cleveland Clinic on the sort of on the use case side, and actually with engineers from IBM on running these simulations and on quantum computers. And the idea is to bridge the gap and come up with new computational approaches that allow us to efficiently screen and identify suitable photodynamic therapy cancer drugs with the desired properties. And so what kind of properties do we want? And so bear with me, this is might not be your everyday cartoon, but basically you can think about the photosensitizer to have a bunch of different configurations, or as we chemists say, electronic states it lives in, okay? So there's something like a ground state, there's something like a so-called excited state, actually different excited states. They're characterized by this S here, which means singlet, and T, which means, for example, triplet spins, so different configurations of electronic spins in these states. And so the idea is to bring the photosensitizer from this ground state, where it's not doing anything, up to an excited state with a certain probability here. And then from there, it can release some energy to go from this state to this state. And so there's, again, a probability involved. And from this state, energy can be released to oxygen in the cancer cell that is surrounding this molecule in the cell, and then this oxygen can be brought from this inactive form, which is so-called triplet oxygen, to a reactive species called singlet oxygen, and that actually kills the cancer cell. Okay, so these reactive oxygen species, those are the important things you want to generate here, and so there is a lot one can actually compute with the computational pipeline. That is how much is the difference between this energy of the ground state and the excited state, and how likely is it that light will be absorbed, so this probability one can compute, and so on and so forth. So all these different properties here shown on these arrows, that's something one can actually compute. And hence, if one is able to predict this in advance, one can actually find out what kind of wavelengths is needed, so what kind of laser do I need to shine on a patient who has taken this drug, and how effectively is the light energy then transformed into chemical energy, okay? And so different cancer cells have different surroundings. So there might be some cancer cells, for example, in solid tumors where there's less oxygen. So then you need actually a different, to target a different final state from which energy is transferred to the surrounding of the cancer cell. So photosensitizers need to have also certain properties depending on what kind of cancer cell you're actually targeting. Okay, so now we start with a little bit more complexity. So the question is, why do we want to use quantum computing for such a use case? Okay, so the question was raised before, so is there any reason why classical shouldn't work? And so, since we have probably an expert audience here, let's just say, okay, we have sort of all the electronic states that we can target, so the Hilbert space, so-called Hilbert space, we have in this disk here. And the classical complexity that we can describe and that we have for any state that lives on this disk here, and if we go from inner to outer, the complexity changes and rises, okay? And we take just one parameter, call it chi. And so the question is, how far can we push classical methods? And the answer is, well, we can start from here, we can go out, further out, we increase this parameter chi here, and classical methods become computationally more and more difficult to actually carry out. And until we reach sort of a classical limit, what we can do with today's supercomputers. But what happens if our electronic states of this photosensitizer actually has a complexity that lives out here? So suddenly we can see, okay, there might be a problem. We cannot reach those states. We cannot describe those states in a reasonable manner. And so the question is, do we really face such a situation? And the answer is, in our project here, in our use case with Cleveland Clinic, we look into a photosensitizer that has this nice acronym here, TLD 1433, which has a ruthenium atom sitting here, and then some other like sulfur atoms here. So basically, think about a large molecule that actually can absorb light and transfer it, the extra energy, to the surrounding oxygen here. And so here we looked at the size of the problem we can study on a quantum computer versus the bond dimensions versus the parameter size, this chi, as I mentioned before. And so basically, these dots here tell you how large does chi have to be in order to solve the problem classically with sufficient accuracy so that it can be predictive, okay? And so this is a Lin log plot. And you can see here, it basically follows a straight line, even for these small numbers here. So that tells you that essentially the problem size scales exponentially, okay? So that's why we think there is potential for a use case here with quantum computers. So then the question is, how can we reach those target states? The good news is, in principle, quantum circuits have the possibility to have exponential bond dimension chi, so they could cover the solution space. That's nice. But the question is then, how can you design your quantum circuit in order to represent those states? Okay? So there are different degrees of freedom. So you have like single qubit gates to perform rotations. You have 2-qubit gates to introduce entanglement. So the question is, how can you design such circuits, and how deep are they? Okay. And so the problem is, the caveat is that the space of shallow circuits with the bond dimension chi are exponentially small. So it's not easy to actually find those circuits. So that's something we wanted to tackle in this use case here. And how do we do that? So there are two crucial challenges. So basically, one is to explore the space of all available circuits, and the second is you might be able to sort of touch upon the target states here. Well, the question is, can we increase even the expressivity further beyond that? So can we maybe think about something that combines the strength of classical methods with quantum circuits? And so for the circuit optimization, so the exploration of circuits, so here the way we do it is we don't do it on a quantum computer itself. And why is that? Because extracting information from a quantum device is, at the moment, still slow and costly. and there's still noise. So noise actually may hinder your optimization. So how can we do that? And actually, we came up with a new method that allows us to optimize circuits just by purely classical means. And we call it Majorana propagation. I will not go into details, but if you are interested, here's a reference to this method. And the nice thing is it has performance guarantees. So one has mathematical guarantees that that it works, and basically it is very fast. So in previous times, optimizing quantum circuits had been a matter of maybe days, even weeks, depending on the size of your quantum circuit. And now this can be done within hours or minutes, depending on the size of the circuit. The second challenge is to increase this expressivity. And so here our key idea is, and this is an algorithm that we are working on, is to combine sort of the best classical methods in town. So basically use a tensor network-like approach. And in quantum chemistry, if you're familiar with quantum chemistry, one of these methods is called a density matrix renormalization group. So it's a tensor network approach in quantum chemistry. And so basically using an approach in post-processing that uses the output from a quantum computer together with the classical tensor network and combine the strengths of both to actually cover a much larger target space here. And not only that, actually, it also introduces a way to get rid of the noise that current near-term quantum devices actually have. And so in that sense, in this project, we developed a full-stack pipeline that basically allows anyone to start with just a chemical structure of a given photosensitizer, trying to formulate, and I think Gernot before was mentioning this, trying to find the correct model within which to actually transform the problem into something that a quantum computer understands. So basically trying to set up the right chemistry model, optimize this model in the first place, and then start to encode this to be ready to run on a quantum computer. And then once you have done the experiment, of course, one needs to think about extracting the data as well from a quantum computer, and then do the post-processing. So essentially compute the noise-free results, and at the end of it, you also want then to extract all these properties I was mentioning before, like the probability to go from a ground to an excited state, and so on and so forth. And because time is a little bit short here, I just want to briefly mention 3 of these things here. And the first one is basically once you have found an optimal non-compiled circuit, one of the things one needs to think about is how to optimally compile it for the quantum device at hand. So that's something that one should really think about, because different topologies of quantum computer might require actually a different compilation of the circuit, and hence maybe even a different way of optimizing quantum circuits. So maybe one circuit that works on, say, a superconducting device might not be the best one to actually run on an ion trap device. And finally, also, you can think about a quantum chemistry problem is compiled in fermionic space, and essentially you want to change that into a qubit representation. And then once you have run the experiment, then of course the question is, how good is the data and how well can we extract the data? And so here I show 2 different results. So this is the energy we're actually after. So roughly this should be the energy we should get out from our circuit. If we run a very deep circuit, this is unfortunately what we get, for example, on current IBM devices. So it's more or less somewhere around, I would say, more or less useless. But if you run a shallower circuit, you might actually get some good signal here. And so the question is always to find the balance between the right deepness of the circuit and the capability of the device itself. And then once you have extracted the data, then it's about trying to reach the ground state or the exact solution for the data from the quantum computer. So essentially mitigating the noise of the quantum device. And so here I show some results where we start to optimize the tensor network. So each step here means we optimize the tensor network ansatz using the quantum computer as a warm start for this tensor network. And as we increase the number of updates here, so the optimization steps, the closer we actually get to the solution. And once this is done, essentially we have a very good reference energy. And the question is, what can we do with it? And at a conference like this, obviously, the next step is we want to integrate our quantum pipeline with an AI pipeline, so machine learning-based approach. Because right now, if we think about a machine learning model that allows us to, for example, look at various photosensitizers in a very quick way, we have to provide also some input data in order for the machine learning model to be able to predict what is a property of a photosensitizer it may not have seen yet. Okay, so we need to enrich the data set for a machine learning model, and this is where quantum comes in. So we want quantum solutions not to remain isolated demonstrations, but actually become integrated into real drug discovery pipelines. And that's where pharma industry is heading. So using machine learning-based pipelines to explore the chemical compound space. And so with this, I would like to conclude and just point out that the pipeline I've been showing here, and parts of it, and basically all parts of it, are now introduced as a Qiskit function coming sometime in November to the IBM environment. So if you are already on IBM Quantum, you may actually want to try this out coming this November. And that is to say, our path to impact in photodynamic therapy is not us alone here at Algorithmiq doing the quantum software development. It's actually the interplay of photosensitizer research together with clinical doctors, together with chemical engineers, and with quantum hardware providers in order to identify drugs in the space of photodynamic therapy that actually can make a relevance or can make an impact in clinical practice. And with this, I would like to thank you for your attention.